Going beyond the headlines. Asking the questions you want answered. Exploring government policies and how they impact you. We are delving deeper.
Good evening and welcome to Delving Deeper. I am your host, Sonolala. Joining us this evening is the Honorable Mc Clashie, the Minister of Labour. Good evening, Minister, and welcome back to Delving Deeper.
Good evening to you and to the general public.
We have a lot to talk about today. We have the minimum wage, we have occupational health and safety, but I want to start with the budget. We recently had the national budget. Your ministry would have received just under $400 million for the next fiscal year. How is this going to be dispersed?
We have 391 million of that 402 million that really is about recurrent expenditure. It's split between general administration. We have the OGT program, the OSH, and the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies that we also cater for in that sum. The 10 plus million is really in terms of development, and we have done it in two tranches. One is physical infrastructure, and that is we're moving the OSH offices from Port of Spain to St. Augustine, and we have some remedial works to do at the College of Cipriani College of Labor. So the rest of it is really the soft issues where we use that money to do studies, consultations, create new programs, and so on. So we have issues like the migration policy that we need to deal with. We have issues with child labor. We have issues with HIV. And all of these require consultation at various levels. And that money is basically used to do those consultations and create, like I call it, new products.
Is this around the average funding you all get for the fiscal year? And what new steps are you going to take to bring you in the Ministry of Labour for the coming year?
Well, yes, it is. It hovers around that level. And remember, if we have changes in expenditure, we have mid-year review where we can actually go back and revisit some of those costs.
The minimum wage is going to be increased by about $3 to about $20.50. How many employees are expected to benefit from this?
We average at around 190,000 workers will benefit from that $3 increase.
And in terms of businesses, have you all done any analysis in terms of how this is going to affect businesses? Would they be able to afford it?
Well, in many instances, a lot of the jobs out there are way beyond the minimum wage. So the 190 plus people we're talking about, 190,000, really is at the informal economy and at some of the lower levels where you do not require necessarily deep expertise. So it really affects the small and medium-sized enterprises more than any other area. And we feel that that level of increase is something that they can, in fact, deal with. We need to find a sweet spot because although we know that the minimum wage of $20.50 is not a living wage, we cannot move that wage too significantly because then it will create a lot of what we call burn in the economy, where inflation will jump and you will defeat the purpose for which you're giving a minimum wage, which is to bring some relief to the lower levels of employees.
I know the Minister of Finance would have indicated that a level of how much it's going to benefit the employees in terms of between 500 to 1,000 every month. But have you done any analysis on how much employees would benefit in terms of the amount they would be getting on a monthly end?
Yes, we would, and the finance minister is correct. People will be getting some significant movement in terms of their disposable income. How and what they do with that disposable income is an individual matter. What we have attempted to do is to provide them with some level of relief that they can now look at some of the basic things that affect them and deal with those things. We're not burying our heads in the sand and assuming that $20.50 will make everyone happy and allow them to pay all their rents and cover all their expenses. But it is a move in the right direction.
With the impending increase in electricity rates and so on, I know the finance minister and the public utilities minister would have indicated that they're going to make sure that this increase doesn't affect people who earn a minimum wage in terms of shielding them so far with the rebate system with TNTech and so on. Have you done any analysis, and are you aware of this?
Yes, I'm aware, but at the Ministry of Labor, we have not done any analysis on what the impact will be, but we have been made to understand that with the rebates and so on, it's not going to be very significant. And in some instances, they're not going to have to pay anything extra because of those rebates. We will have to look at when it is actually implemented, and then we would see who really falls within that basket or within that net that will benefit from it. But to answer your question directly, no, we have not done any specific reviews at the Ministry of Labor.
Of course, unions would have been clamoring for much more than $3. Any message to them?
Like I say, as I said, I'm not burying my head in the sand, and I recognize that we need at some point in time to move to a living wage. We are a bit off from that right now, given how our economy is structured. But we will and work with them and look forward to that time when we can actually implement a living wage. But until then, we have to balance good sense with what prevails in the economy. In other words, you cannot pay from what you don't have.
I believe this is going to take effect on January 1st, 2024. Are all steps in place to have this done?
Yes, the increase on January 1st is not going to be an issue in terms of implementing. The issues will be in monitoring whether or not people are paying the minimum wage. And that requires us in the ministry to do a lot of work with regards to sensitizing people about the wage, indicating to them if they are not getting the wage, how they can pursue redress through the ministry. And we have our inspectors who go out in the field and actually look at people's books and ensure that they're paying the minimum wages. And what we try to do is to get them to correct their errors and their wrong ways by paying the minimum wage. And if not, then under the Minimum Wage Act, there are reliefs in law to compel them to pay the minimum wage.
How is the ministry going to ensure that employers abide by this law? And is there any recourse for employees who doesn't receive the increase?
Yes, the employees, if they are not getting the minimum wage, can use social media, email, or contact the ministry directly. And where those wages are not being paid, our inspectors will visit these establishments to ensure that the minimum wage, as determined, is paid.
Is there a fine attached to this in terms of if an employer does not abide by this law?
Yes, there are some punitive measures available to the ministry, but we try to use good sense because it's in nobody's interest to get into litigation and so on. And what we find is that the employers who do not abide by it, normally when we read them the Riot Act, they normally step in line and pay the required rates.
Earlier this year, we had the head of the Occupational Safety and Health Agency on the show. One of the issues she raised was the need for more safety inspectors. Is this still an issue?
Yes, it is an issue. My understanding is that there are 60 inspectors at various levels, 48 what we will call inspectors, 6 inspectors, 1 chief inspector. And that will give us a complement of 60. At present, we have 26 inspectors, and we have all the people at the higher level in place. We expect to hire an additional 10 when the offices are relocated. There is an issue with space right now, and therefore we cannot accommodate additional inspectors. But very early in the new year, we will be moving from 26 to 36. And then by the end of next year, we hope to have the full complement of 48.
If we do have enough space, in terms of if space is not an issue, what is the correct amount or the ample amount that the amount of inspectors that is, that you would like to see in the system?
We would like to see the entire 60 people and the 48 inspectors who are normally on the move. We would like to have our entire contingent in place.
The Commission of Inquiry into the Paria diving tragedy is expected to submit its report by the end of this month. Your ministry would have played a significant role in that the OSH report in the investigation into that fatal incident. What are some of the things learned from this process, and what can it help in recommendations for other similar issues?
Well, one of the things that I think we need to get on record is that there is this notion that the OSH authority can prevent accidents and the like. The OSH authority cannot prevent accidents. We can put regulations in place, we can ask people to follow those regulations, but if those regulations are not followed on site by those people actually performing the job or by entities who are guided under the regulations, then the OSH really is about compliance. And when the accident or incident takes place, the OSH authority will go into the sites and make recommendations, and they have the power to shut down work sites. They have full investigative powers. They can also hire subject matter experts, because not every incident they have the necessary skill sets for. So in that particular instance, the OSH authority actually brought in experts from the US, because nobody in Trinidad had the experience with hyperbaric chambers and the issues that resulted therefrom. So the OSH will continue to provide updated regulations. They will continue to look at the issues surrounding health and safety at the workplace. But we really want those at the workplace to take responsibility and accountability for their actions.
Regarding the incident at Naikwan, did the Commission of Inquiry into the Paria incident, at least some of the recommendations or some would have come out of that, helped in any way into recommendations into the issue at Naikwan?
No, they are two completely separate issues. They're mutually exclusive. There are no connections between the diving incident and what happened in Naikwan, which was an explosion as a result of operational conditions. So one would not necessarily feed into the other or impact it.
The 2023 Commonwealth Caribbean Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program is such a tongue twister. The annual review meeting was recently held in TNT. What are some of the things that came out of this?
Well, that meeting was held last week, Tuesday to Friday, and we had present a number of Caribbean countries who feed into that system, who provide labor. We had officials from the government of Canada present, and we had actual farmers who were also present. What we did at that meeting is looked at the conditions under which employees work. We looked at legislation in Canada. that would provide guidance for how we send people and under what conditions. And we had a number of issues that we dealt with, all dealing with, I would say, the hygiene aspects of people actually employed. We spoke, of course, about expanding the program. And just to give you an idea as to where we are at, we have about 600 people on that program. And Jamaica, as the largest provider from the Caribbean, has 9,000. Now, we have recently expanded our office in Ontario to get more boots on the ground in order to get more people with going into the system. So we have maybe about 5 or 6 people in Canada looking at our program. Jamaica has 23. So if you do just a basic comparison, you see where boots on the ground will get you. So we have also made a plug by hosting that particular meeting for the farmers to utilize more Trinbagonian people on their farms. And we're hoping to see the benefits of that within the next year and the years to come. We would really like to incrementally move it to maybe 1,200 and then 2,400, and certainly get at least 5,000 people on that program.
In terms of the retirement age, it's about to be increased from 60 to 65. What is the ministry's view on this in terms of, I know it's a voluntary process. What is the ministry's view on this increase in the retirement age?
That's a work in progress. That's really being championed by the Ministry of Finance. But as Minister of Labor, I support the move from 60 to 65, more so on a voluntary basis, because I think there are lots of people who attain the age of 65 who still have a lot to contribute to this country. I think they have a lot of expertise and they can mentor and develop persons. How we do it and why we do it is also important. In other words, we need to, in my mind, not just keep people for keeping people's sake. We need to rationalize that there are a lot of young people who also need opportunities. And therefore, we also need to mentor them so that they become better workers and more productive and so on. So there is a balancing act that needs to take place, but baseline, I am in support for moving the retirement age from 60 to 65.
I recently read a report that Barbados is also trying to increase that from 60 to 65, I believe, as well. Do you think they took some advice from us?
No, I think they're doing quite independently. If we look at the world in general, and we look at some of the developed countries, we note, and if you travel and you go into a Walmart, you see very senior citizens still at work, which means that people recognize that we just don't put people out to pasture because of age. People life expectancies is much longer, and therefore they can be productive even at a senior age.
What are some of the successes from the Ministry of Labor?
Oh, well, we have had a couple of things happening. We have been able to maintain the OJT program and expand it a bit. So we're moving it from 5,000 to 6,000. We have been able to finalize some draft policies with regards to legislation. For instance, the Industrial Relations Act, the Trade Union Act, the Cipriani College of Labor Act. We have a number of baseline studies and so on that we would have accomplished. We would have put in a trilingual line for people who are being sexually harassed in the workplace. We have moved on our HIV advocacy into the workplace. We have done a lot of work on child labor, and we would have created a lot of programs and so on. We continue to expand the Cipriani College. We are doing a lot of regulations and so on the us side. And therefore, we feel that we are sensitizing people more and more as to their rights in the workplace. So we've had some successes, I would believe, over the last year or two.
What continues to be your biggest challenge as the Minister of Labour?
Well, as every other minister, we would all like more resources and more money. Unfortunately, it's one pie that needs to be shared with some degree of fairness. So we would really like to see a number of different studies take place. So for instance, we do not now have sufficient labor market information that would guide how we plan and what programs we put in place. By way of an example, we do not know, and we're just doing a survey on labor market information, but more on the demand side rather than the supply side. The demand side is where employers say what they want. Traditionally, we have been doing a lot of work on the supply side, creating engineers and social scientists. But what does the firm want? And when we get that kind of information, then we are able to guide policy in terms of education. In other words, are we educating people in the right disciplines? Are we educating enough people in the right disciplines? What are the right disciplines? So that would have an impact on the university, on your secondary schools, on training programs, and so on. So labor market information is critical to planning and development and how we go about that planning and development. So that would, as an example of how what we do in the Ministry of Labor impacts the wider community.
How's your collaboration with the Ministry of Education in terms of bringing some of those programs to suit the labor market in the decade or so to come?
Well, we have a good working relationship with the Ministry of Education because the Ministry of Education also is responsible for a lot of the technical programs through MIC, NESC, and so on, and apprenticeship programs. And the OJT program is a kind of apprenticeship program, but not with the same kind of technical flavor. When we are done with those particular exercises and the consultations and so on, that information would be shared with both Ministry of Planning and Development and the Ministry of Education to use within their frame to determine programs and national development.
I just want to go back to the retirement age. In terms of people who would be against it, I know it's a voluntary process, but for people who are against it, what would your message be to them?
My message to them is, if you're against it and you are 60, you have the option. If you are for it and you are 60, you have the option. So nobody is forcing you to do anything. But at the same time, if there are people who can contribute and be of benefit to this society, I would not stand in their way.
You're the Minister of Labour and you wear a hat as the MP for Labray as well. We recently saw the Point Fortin Highway open, and from my understanding, from what I've heard from people I know who live down there, it takes about roughly 20-25 minutes from San Fernando now to Point Fortin, which is a lot less time in traffic and so on. How do you feel about this opening?
I am elated, happy. It really has made a difference, and it has also created some challenges because now complete communities are being bypassed and we have to re-engineer those communities. We have to find ways to create sustainability and so on in those communities. So going from San Fernando to Point Fortin, they bypass a number of my own constituencies, which is Rosilac, Labre, Vessany, um, Vance River, and so on. And therefore, it creates some issues there. But I totally support it. I use it. I grew up in Point Fortin, so I know the hassle of getting into San Fernando and how long it took. And from where I live now to Point Fortin, which would have taken on average half an hour to 35 minutes, in 12 minutes, I'm in Point. So I see the benefit. I have gotten the feedback from constituents that they are really happy and delighted that that project is finally here with us.
It was said at the opening of the Point Fortin Highway, and I know you mentioned it as well, that it is going to affect the communities in terms of the business community and people who get that livelihood from people passing through the communities. What can they do to reinvent themselves and be relevant again?
Well, the Southwest Peninsula, which is where we're talking about, is ripe for tourism and local tourism. We have a number of indigenous products that we can use. In times like these, people get creative and create their own little businesses. But wasn't that the same thing they were saying with California and Cuba and the Freeport when the highway was built? And those are burgeoning little communities right now. They would have gone through the same teeth and pains as we are going through, but like them, I think we have the ability to bounce back and to create something different.
What can we expect from your ministry moving forward?
Oh, well, we will continue to push our legislative agendas. We will continue to work with the HIV advocacy and HIV in the workplace. We will continue to look at migration issues. We will continue to look at child labor. We will continue to do enforcement where necessary. We will do a number and have already begun in fiscal 23-24 to do a number of symposiums. We hope to create a signature event for the people involved in labor. We continue to encourage tripartism and multi-tripartism within the way we do things. So we hope to bring the unions and so on back to the table. We will expand Cipriani Labor College. We will expand the OGT. We have a lot of work before us.
Minister, thanks very much for joining us on this week's episode of Delving Deeper. I know many people would be looking forward to that minimum wage increase on January 1st. Final thoughts?
Final thoughts is that the Ministry of Labor does a lot of work, primarily in the background. And there is this thought that the Ministry of Labor is the ministry that gives jobs to everybody. We don't. We do, however, have a unit within the ministry that we are going to expand, which is the National Employment Service, which we are doing something online right now to bring it into the modern world so that people can send in their resumes and we can match job skills with employers and so on. But the Ministry of Labor is much more than finding jobs for people. We are about actually creating the environment in which businesses and employees can work and do so in a decent way for a decent living in a productive way. So that will be my final thoughts on where we are at.
Join us at the same time next week for another episode of Delving Deeper. I am Sonalala, and on behalf of the entire group, have a great night.